Hello, class. So today we are covering Chapter 7, Gathering Material, and Chapter 8, Supporting Your Ideas. So we've already talked about the main concepts behind speaking to inform. So hopefully by now you have really narrowed down what topic you want to do your informative speech. So the next steps are doing the research, finding the material that you're going to be using and how best or what are the best ways to support your ideas or your arguments for your informative and then also for your persuasive. So the first thing you want to be able to do is use your own experience. Everybody is an expert on something. You might think you're not, but you probably have more information on certain topics than other people in your class. We often speak best about subjects with which we are familiar with, and just facts and figures can be very depersonalizing. So you want to be able to supplement your speech with that personal touch of your own experience, and that can really bring your speech to life. So you'll add color and human interest and make your life stories work for you. The other way to gather materials is by actually doing library research. So we'll be talking about librarians, the catalog, reference works, newspaper and periodical databases, as well as academic databases. So librarians, you will get some of the information for your speeches from the library, hopefully. You won't just limit it to online, like internet. So the library contains many resources, and librarians actually are experts in their own field. They're trained in the library use and research methods. So they can definitely be very helpful when you go to the library in finding your way, how to locate certain sources, even track down a specific piece of information that you're needing for your speech. So don't hesitate to ask a librarian for help. The catalog. So the catalog lists all the books, periodicals, and other resources that that library owns. It allows you to search for books by author, by title, subject, or keywords. So let's say you are doing your informative speech on child development and divorce. So you would be able to just plug in keywords, children and divorce, psychology of children, traumatizing events. So just lots of different keywords and see what are those different articles and information that you're able to find based on those keywords. And the catalog also tells you whether the book that you want is already checked out or if it's available. Reference works. These are often kept in a specific part of the library, which is usually called the reference section. And the major kinds of reference works that you're probably going to be using for your speeches are encyclopedias, yearbooks, quotation books, and biographical aids. So encyclopedias, I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with, but there are actually two types. You have general encyclopedias, which is usually what we use, and then there are special encyclopedias. These cover specific fields in more depth. So some examples of these would be the African American Encyclopedia, the Encyclopedia of Religion, and the McGraw-Hill Encyclopedia of Science and Technology. Then you have yearbooks. These aren't the type you would buy in your high school. These yearbooks are published annually and they contain amazing amount of information about that specific year. So some examples of a yearbook would be Facts on File and World Almanac and Books of Facts. Then you have quotation books. The best known collection of quotations is actually Bartlett's Familiar Quotations, and it has more than 25,000 quotes from historical figures and contemporary figures. And this one specific collection of quotations has actually been regarded as an indispensable source for speakers and writers alike. Then you have biographical aids. These are useful when you need information about people in the news. You can actually turn to one of many reference works that contain their brief life, their career facts, so about any contemporary men and women. The most popular biographical aid is published by Who's Who. Then you have newspaper and periodical databases. This database allows you to locate articles of thousands of publications. So you'll type in the database search box and citations for articles that are related to your subject, and it'll appear on your screen. Now you have to be careful because sometimes you'll just get an abstract of the article, the full article, instead of the actual article. So you want to keep in mind that an abstract is only a summary about what the article is about. You never want to cite an article based on just looking at the summary. On the abstract. So newspaper and periodicals, the three major databases are ProQuest, LexisNexis Academic, and World News Digest. You have newspaper and periodical databases. They are research aid that catalogs articles from a large number of magazines, journals, and newspapers. And once again, an abstract is just a summary of a magazine or journal article. The abstract is written by somebody else, not by the actual original author of that catalog or of the article. So you want to be very careful to read the full article, have access to the full article, and cite the full article. But if you don't and you only have access to the abstract, then don't use it. Then you also have academic databases, and that catalogs articles from scholarly journals. So think about it this way: at colleges and universities all around the world, experts are researching almost every aspect of both the natural world and human society. So when they work on these studies, they actually submit it and get it peer reviewed, so that way it can get checked out, and then they can publish it, and it'll be available in the academic databases. So those journals will be available to you, and the best place to find these scholarly research is in Academic OneFile and JSTOR. We have the internet. So the internet has been called the world's biggest library. You can have access to a great deal of information on the internet, but it's just not the same range and depth that you would find at the library. That is why experts advise use the internet just to supplement your research, but not to fully replace library research. And then later on, we'll discuss about how to evaluate internet sources for reliability and objectivity. Remember, reliability is it credible? Is it trustworthy? And objectivity is lack of favoritism toward one side or another, freedom from bias. So basically, you're seeing whoever published this, do they have some type of interest based on the results or the side, certain, one way or the other. You also have specialized research resources, such as government resources. These will provide information from federal government or from state and local agency documents and publications. So some examples of those would be USA.gov, United States Census Bureau, and World Factbook. Let's also talk about Wikipedia. I know when I was in college, this wasn't something that we would normally use. It was kind of frowned upon, wasn't very reliable. Anybody could go in there and change information. But it has evolved since then. Wikipedia is now a reliable source of information. It is a good place to start researching your topic, but don't end there. Now, Wikipedia will provide you additional resources. You'll see footnotes, a list of references, external links, videos, or still images. So those are all additional sources that you can, follow those and see what other information that will lead you to. So take advantage of those resources. And, once again, Wikipedia is a good place to start, but do not end your research there. So if you find something on the internet document, how do you evaluate it? You want to remember that once you find something in a library, you're pretty sure that it's already been evaluated one way or another before it even gets to you. But with the internet, it's a completely different story because anyone with a computer and internet access can share their opinions with a discussion group, can publish in electronic newsletter, or even create a personal web page or blog. So when you hear the saying, don't believe everything you read, it never has applied better than to anything you find on the internet. So when you're evaluating internet documents, you're trying to look at 3 criteria to distinguish the jewels from the junk: authorship, sponsorship, and recency. Authorship means, is the author of the web document that you've accessed clearly identified? Can you state who it is? What are their qualifications? Is the author an expert on that subject area? And can their data and opinions be accepted as objective or unbiased? So you're looking, is it facts versus opinions and beliefs? Then you have sponsorship. Some of the web documents are published by organizations or businesses, government agencies, instead of an individual author. So you want to be able to then, if there is no author, then is it published by this organization? You must judge whether the sponsoring organization is impartial enough to cite them in your speech. So you want to see, are they objective in their research? For example, let's say you're doing a speech about the negative health effects or impacts of smoking. But then you find a document that states that smoking actually can be healthy based on this research. And that research was conducted by Philip Morris International. So you would see this probably wouldn't be a really good document to use because Philip Morris makes money off of cigarettes. So they're going to be biased on what the results are. You also want to see if it has history of accuracy. If you cannot verify the credentials of the author or of the credible sponsor, then do not use that document for your speech. Now let's talk about recency. So just because a document is on the internet, it doesn't mean that those facts and figures are up to date. If you are using a source located through a campus library, you can usually be pretty confident that it's current and objective and reliable. But the best way to determine the recency of an internet document is to look for the copyright date, publication date, or the date of last revision. And usually you'll find it somewhere on either the top or the bottom page, a corner, but you'll usually be able to find it on that page. When you're looking or seeing statistics, you should never cite from an undated source. You always want to use statistics that are up to date. So let's say you're doing a speech about, how the United States has the highest number of traffic accidents. Would you want to use a statistic that gives the annual deaths from 2002? Obviously not, because that's not up to date. You would want to find the most up to date, which would probably be, depending on the research, 2018 or 2019. With news and government sites, usually you'll also see the date on there of when it was last updated. So sometimes we think that interviewing is just for journalists, but it's actually a really great research and research tool to gather material and gather evidence. So we're going to talk about 3 principles for effective interviews: what you would be doing before, during, and after the interview. So first, you want to find the purpose of the interview. What information is it that you need? What questions do you still have after you've done extensive research and you can't locate it through the research? And these are questions that need to be answered because it's not available. So that's what you want to figure out. What are the questions that I need to ask somebody? And who is that somebody? So once you decide who to interview, you want to usually go to the very top. Let's say you're doing a speech about college athletics, then you probably want to talk to the director, the athletic director. And from there, when it's somebody who is in leadership, they have a really good understanding of the more broad issues. But if you need information that's more specific, at least they can direct you directly to who it is you need to speak to for those questions. When it comes to arranging the interview, it's really easy for people to brush you off and say no, or they're not available. through phone and email. So it's definitely best to try going in person and try to request an interview. It's harder to say no in person. Then you want to decide whether to record the interview. The major advantage of recording is that it gives you an exact record that you can actually check later for direct quotes and important facts. You should still take notes by hand in case you have any technical malfunctions, but you always have to ask the person for permission to record. If they say no, you'll need to respect that and take notes only. So never record an interview without the knowledge or consent of the person being interviewed. Number 5, prepare your questions. Do not ask questions that you can research yourself. So imagine, you're a very busy person. Somebody asks for an interview. They have these questions for you that clearly they could have found if they did just a little bit research, looked at, maybe the school website or the company website. You kind of feel like, hey, my time's valuable here. If you would have done research, you would have been able to get these answers. So do not ask them questions that you could have gotten with research. That's the whole point of the interview. You have questions that you can't find the answers to anywhere else. You also don't want to ask leading questions. People think that there is little relation between academics and athletics. You think that's a problem too, don't you? So you want to stay away from those types of questions, that you're trying to lead them to give you the answer that you're looking for. Also, don't use hostile loaded questions. And don't be scared to ask tough questions that need to be asked. But when you do, you want to do it, ask them neutrally, respectfully, and you want to save those tough questions for the very end of the interview. That way you already have most of your questions answered. So if they decide, you know what, the interview stops here, then you already got, a pretty good amount of information. During your interview, dress appropriately, be on time, repeat the purpose of the interview to the person. Don't go straight into questions. You want to introduce yourself, take a moment to state the purpose of your interview. That way you'll have a more clear and helpful answers if the subject that you're interviewing knows, okay, what's that certain line of questioning that you're going to be following. If you are going to be recording and you got their permission, set up the recorder, have everything ready, and keep your interview on track. So your goal is to get answers. You already have your list of questions that you have. But if the person brings up a point that you would like to explore further, then ask more questions about that issue, but just remember to get back on track to your list of questions. Listen carefully. So during the interview, there might be something that you don't really understand. So definitely ask them for clarification, and do not overstay your welcome. Keep within the time given by that person, unless they, definitely have more information and are prolonging the session. And then always thank them for their time. After the interview, you want to review your notes as soon as possible. Since the interview is still fresh in your mind, you know what those cryptic comments and scrawls in your notes mean. So you want to clarify them before your details become hazy. I know I've done this before where I'm taking notes, and if I wait too long, later on I'm looking at them and I have no idea what I wrote. So you want to do it as soon as possible. As you review your notes, you want to concentrate on 2 things: discovering what the main points that emerged during that interview, and pulling out specific information that might be useful in your speech. And number 2, you want to transcribe your notes. So basically make a written copy, write it down clearly or type it. But you want to put all your research notes in one format. That way you can arrange and rearrange them easily whenever you start to organize your speech. Tips for doing research: start early, do not wait till the very end. I think that's the biggest mistakes that students do when they're faced with a research project. I know I did it too. I'm guilty when I was a student, but waiting too long to begin. So preparing a speech, think of it like a puzzle that you're trying to put together. And once you have gathered all the pieces of information, so your research, your materials, you have to now decide what's the best way for them to fit together. That way your speech can be the most effective and impactful. So give more time to yourself. That way you can get those pieces to fit just right. And then number 2, you want to make a preliminary bibliography. So in your research, you'll be running across lots of titles of books, magazine articles, internet documents. Um, so as you're going through them that have the useful information that you're needing for your speech topic, you want to enter each of them in your preliminary bibliography. It's basically a list of all of these documents and sources. And as a result, then you'll have more to work with. The more information, the better, versus you don't even have enough information to work with. You're just throwing in the little that you found. The final sources that you do use will be listed on your actual bibliography that you'll be turning in with your outline. And we'll be talking about the outlines a little bit later down the road. As far as the formats, it's really up to you and the topic that you choose, whether it's going to be MLA or APA. We'll also be talking about that. One's more humanities, the other one's more like psychology, those medical and scientific sides. So bibliography, it's a list compiled in the research process of the works that contain information about your speech topic. So basically the sources, where you got this information from. In your book, if you see figure 7.4, it will give you an example of the two formats, MLA and APA, and the sources. So how you would put that in your bibliography list, whether it's a book, a magazine article, a newspaper article, or so on. So this is a very helpful page. So let's continue talking about the tips for research. Number 3, take notes efficiently. Take lots of notes. You won't be able to remember all of the information that you're coming across as you're researching on the internet and magazines and books. So you want to record your notes in a consistent format. Record the note, the source of the note, where it came from, the heading indicating the subject of that note. And that way, whenever you're organizing your speech, just at looking at each note and glancing at it, you know where you want to put that information at. Make a separate entry for each note. Don't try to record all of the information from one source on one single note. So say there's a book that you found lots of information for your speech. It would be really difficult to organize it if you have all of this information on one note, because the information might be following different topics. In that same book, you might find information that's more relevant to your main point number 1, versus later on down that same book, you might find information that really supports your third main point. So make sure that you are making a separate note or separate note card or entry for just the different main points and subpoints that you find. You want to also make a note, distinguish what is a direct quotation, what is paraphrasing, and what is your own idea. Because what you're trying to do is give credit where credit is due and avoid accidental plagiarizing. So think about your materials as you are researching. Don't approach the research process as a very mechanical routine. You want to do it creatively. If you think about what you are finding in your research, you will see your topic differently each time you take a note. You will find new relationships, develop new questions, explore new angles. So you will begin to write your speech in your head even as you're doing the research. The more you learn about a topic, you'll start formulating that central idea. Remember, your central idea is that residual message. What do you want your audience to remember after the speech is over? So you'll begin to sketch out the main points and the supporting points as you're doing the research. Sometimes you might even change your point of view on the topic. So then you're going to be rearranging your whole speech. So this is an example of creative research, yet at the same time, critical thinking. You want to keep an open mind as you research, read everything you can about your topic, and think seriously about what you are finding. And that is the summary, what we just went over, chapter 7. And I'll be doing a separate recording for chapter 8.